So, you recently accused Senator Mark Kelly, a veteran and astronaut, of crossing the line for participating in a video reminding troops that they can refuse to follow illegal orders. Okay, let's see some of what you said, my friend.
Sure, in this world that exists like that, don't be an Stephen A. Smith. Be admirable.
When D.L. Hughley called out Stephen A. Smith, he didn't just push back, he cued. He cracked open the whole situation and showed what happens when loud confidence tries to replace real logic. Stephen A. walked onto The View thinking he was about to show his political side, but instead he stepped straight into the biggest self-made PR mess of his entire career. You know better, Senator Kelly. You know better. How dare you do that? You could go to the House. You can draw up paperwork. You could try to start articles of impeachment if you think there's something illegal. I mean, damn, it ain't like y'all haven't done it before. You impeached the man twice. Where'd that get you? Got his behind back in the White House. Had you left him alone in 2020, maybe you wouldn't.
में जो ऐसी है स्टीफन ए स्मिथ मत बनो प्रशंसक
Commander-in-Chief. You don't do that. Before we even dive deep, understand this. D.L. Hughley didn't give Stephen A. some soft critique. He dropped a breakdown so sharp, it shook the internet. It exposed everything messy about Stephen A.'s push to look politically relevant. And the way Hughley just absolutely baptized Stephen A. Smith had people stunned. This wasn't some light disagreement. This wasn't two professionals politely going back and forth. This was Stephen A.'s whole political image getting ripped apart in front of millions. That is a...
Now let me just remind you that Pete Hegseth said in 2016, I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. Now, given the fact that the secretary himself said that, I'd love to give you the opportunity to perhaps change your position on what you said.
I'm not changing a thing. I didn't stutter once. You want to say loud and wrong? Well, you could call it loud and wrong all you want to. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. Here's the reality of the situation. First of all, I don't give a damn what Pete Hegseth has to say because I will tell you right now, he was never qualified for the job. And you are. When you talk about DEI and eradicating that, excuse me, what was he doing? Hosting Fox News on the weekend and all of a sudden he's the defense secretary? Please give me a break. I don't care what he has to say. We get that out the way. As it pertains to Mark Kelly, what I was talking about is the military. What I did was get on the phone with family and friends who have served in the military. And I said, we're not civilians. This is not the court of law. You can be implicated for implying something if you are a former military member or you are a present military member. It wasn't what Mark Kelly said. It's the fact that he was a combat Navy pilot who served in the military who would tell folks ignore an order when it could get illegal. I said illegal. I'm talking about illegal. I understand that. He said you don't have to follow an unlawful order, and that is in the military code of conduct. I'm saying to you, hold on, which I'm aware of, but it didn't sound like you were aware of that.
He's aware of that. He's aware.
No. I disagree with you. Can I ask you a question? I had two governors, by the way, text me to tell me I was wrong, and they agree with you. And I had two senators that reached out to me and said you weren't wrong at all.
Well, Mikey Sherrill did say that the reason they felt the need to put that out is they were constantly being approached by people in the military saying, we're being put in really uncomfortable situations. That to me is a little more relatable when you're a veteran yourself. What I'm saying let me say this real quick or wait till we come back. All I'm saying is this, if you're a member of the military, I'm looking at the soldiers and saying, don't get yourself in trouble. Let somebody else do it. Don't you do it because it ain't gonna work for you. And it all started with him making wild accusations towards Senator Mark Kelly, a decorated Navy pilot, claiming he was basically telling troops to defy the president. And even when Stephen A. was given every chance to step back, clarify, or show some humility, he refused. Instead, Stephen A. doubled down. He got louder, more defensive, and proved exactly what D.L. Hughley warned about. Stephen A. thinks raising his voice equals leadership, and that attitude got exposed instantly. Now, let's break down why D.L. Hughley's words hit so hard, and why Stephen A.'s appearance on The View somehow made everything worse. The whole thing showed a man trying so hard to climb into political conversations that he didn't even realize he was tearing down his own credibility to do it. When Stephen A. sat on The View, he wasn't just defending a take, he revealed his biggest insecurity right on live TV. Co-host Sunny Holston handed him a perfect chance to reset. She pointed out that Pete Hegseth, the current Secretary of Defense, had said almost the same thing as Senator Mark Kelly back in 2016. Heggs literally said that the military won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There are some guys at Leavenworth who made really bad choices on the battlefield, and I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do. That's the same principle, word for word. So Sonny asks him a calm, simple question since Hegst said the same thing. Would Stephen A. like to adjust his position? Stephen A. hit back immediately. I'm not changing a thing. I didn't stutter once. And just like that, instead of reflecting, he got even louder. He started talking about calling his military friends, trying to justify why Mark Kelly, a trained Navy combat pilot, shouldn't have stated something that is already written into military code. Then came the most revealing moment of all. Stephen A. said, I don't give a damn what Pete Hegseth has to say, because he was never qualified for the job. What was he doing hosting Fox News on the weekend? And all of a sudden, he's the defense secretary. But here's where the whole thing flips. Stephen A., a sports commentator who hosts ESPN and podcasts, just questions someone else's qualifications because they were a TV host first. That irony is so thick it practically screams. This goes straight into what D.L. Hughley pointed out. Interesting because he believes obviously that being loud and wrong is leadership, but being loud and wrong is a sole province of old white dudes. They're the only ones who are going to get to be loud and wrong. And then he delivered the knockout punch. What the ironic thing is, Stephen A. Smith's is a broadcaster who thinks he could be president. Stephen A. is loud and wrong, and that's not leadership. Huey didn't just go after the argument, he went after the whole mindset behind it. Huey said Stephen A. is acting like a broadcaster who thinks he can just jump into politics overnight. Meanwhile, Stephen A. questioned Pete Hegseth's resume, even though Stephen A. himself is a sports commentator trying to step into political commentary. That's not just criticism, that's precision. And Hughley didn't stop there. He compared Stephen A. to Admiral Alvin Holsey, a 4-star admiral with 37 years of service who actually resigned rather than follow an order he believed was unlawful. A tale of two black men, one who believes that being loud and wrong is leadership, Stephen A. Smith, and one is Admiral Alvin Holsey.
Don't be a Stephen A. Smith. Be Admiral Hughley. That's real leadership, backed by experience, not volume. It wasn't just a takedown, it was a full reality check with facts behind it. So why did Stephen A. get so defensive? Here's what becomes clear. Politics isn't Stephen A.'s territory, and his reaction showed it loud and clear. He wants to be taken seriously in that world, but he hasn't mastered the space. And every time he raises his voice, instead of raising the quality of his argument, he shows exactly what D.L. Hughley was warning about. When someone feels shaky inside, when they know they're stepping into a lane they don't fully understand, the reaction is almost always the same. They get defensive fast. And that's exactly what happened with Stephen A. If somebody checked him on a sports take, if they told him he was off about LeBron or wrong about the Cowboys, he wouldn't explode like he did on The View. He'd crack a joke, smile, or break it down calmly like he's done a million times. But when Sunny Host pressed him on his Mark Kelly comments, Stephen A. snapped into a whole different mode. He cut people off, raised his voice, and started over-explaining like he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. That's not confidence, that's insecurity showing up, loud. And deep down, Stephen A. knows something heavy. People with real military experience think he missed the mark completely. Go look up Stephen A. Smith politics and check the reactions. Most people are saying he doesn't understand the topic. And here's the wild part. A lot of these platforms bringing him on, like PBD Podcast, Sean Hannity, or Chris Cuomo's News Nation, aren't taking him seriously at all. They know he's going to make noise, and noise brings views. They're not searching for wisdom, they're looking for entertainment. Watching Stephen A. stumble through political conversations is eye-catching TV, and the networks know that. But Stephen A. thinks those invites mean he's gaining political respect, gaining authority, gaining a voice at the big table. And that's exactly the illusion D.L. Hughley exposed, a push for political validation that's starting to cost him credibility. Let's be real for a second. Stephen A. is chasing political relevance hard, and that chase is pushing him into bad decisions. Why else defend a take that's so easy to disprove? Why double down when he had multiple clean chances to soften it? Because if he admits he misunderstood the topic, he has to admit he doesn't grasp politics the way he grasps sports, and his ego won't let that happen. So what is Stephen A. trying to gain here? Usually, when public figures go all in defending an administration or political figure, there's a goal behind it. Maybe access, maybe influence, maybe a seat at the table, maybe power. But Stephen A. isn't running for office. He isn't working on legislation. He isn't getting a cabinet job, not realistically. So why is he doing all this? Why push so hard when even the Secretary of Defense has contradicted the stance he's defending? The only answer that fits is simple. Stephen A. is trying to build political capital. He's trying to position himself as a black conservative voice an administration can point to and say, see, we've got support right here. But while he's reaching for this new identity, he's dropping the one thing that made him impactful, his credibility. And that's where this whole story starts cracking open even deeper. Let's run it back to what really started this situation. Senator Mark Kelly, a Navy combat pilot, astronaut, and decorated veteran, simply reminded the military that they are not required to follow unlawful orders. That's the whole statement. Nothing radical, nothing rebellious. It's literally printed in the Uniform Code of Military Justice and taught to everyone in basic training. But Stephen A. twisted that into something it wasn't. He claimed Kelly was telling troops to disobey the president, and went on his show saying Kelly was undermining discipline. But Kelly never said disobey your commander-in-chief. He said troops are not required to follow unlawful orders, something every service member already knows.
And he attacks the credentials of people who disagree, even when he doesn't have those credentials himself. That's why D.L. Hughley's breakdown hit so hard. D.L. didn't just challenge Stephen A.'s argument, he exposed the character flaw behind the mistake, the refusal to accept being wrong. And here's the final truth. Stephen A. is incredible at what he does in the sports world. When he talks basketball or football, he brings energy, charisma, and insight. But politics? Politics is different. The tactics that shake up sports panels, bold claims, loud delivery, stubbornness, can be dangerous in political conversations. Because in sports, being wrong means nothing more than bad predictions. If Stephen A. has an off take about the Cowboys, nobody's safety is on the line. But when the topic is military law, national principles, and leadership, the stakes are real, and the room for error is tiny. When you spread false info about military law, when you come at veterans for stating basic facts, and when you defend impossible positions just to look good for certain politicians, that's when it gets real, because that's when your credibility starts slipping away fast. Nobody's rights vanish over a bad sports take, but in this lane, the fallout is bigger than Stephen A. ever expected. D.L. Hughley didn't just check Stephen A., he stripped his whole political image in front of millions. He showed the world that Stephen A. has been moving like someone who's loud, wrong, and convinced that volume equals leadership. And the wild part? Stephen A. still refuses to see it. He's still standing on that same shaky stance, still convinced he's right even though the facts are screaming otherwise. That's not confidence, that's straight-up delusion. And until Stephen A. can admit he missed the mark, until he shows some humility, until he stops treating political talk like a debate segment on TV, he's going to keep taking hits just like this. D.L. Hughley basically held up a mirror and showed everyone the truth. Stephen A. is so hungry for political validation that he's willing to risk the one thing he built his entire career on: credibility. Don't move like Stephen A. Smith. Move like Admiral Hughley, someone who stood on principle, not ego. If you think D.L. Hughley just dropped the hardest takedown of 2025, hit that like button. If you feel Stephen A. needs to stay in his lane and stick to sports, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real breakdowns exposing what's happening in media and politics, make sure you subscribe because we're just getting warmed up. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.